Star Wars: The Old Republic released almost 15 years ago, and if you were there during launch week, I bet you're feeling pretty old right about now. Personally, I remember the unbelievable hype folks had for this game, the endless forum discussions about it being the undisputed WoW killer, and of course, the infamous Tortanic memes. Because most people certainly didn't expect the game to last this long. But through all the drama, the content drops, and the studio changes, the Old Republic is still alive. In fact, looking at the massive updates dropping this year, some would say it's getting better than ever. Today we'll be looking at SWTOR's history, what's in store for the future, and if it's actually worth playing in 2026. I'm Mr. Holton, now grab a cup of coffee and make yourself comfortable, and let's go back in time to the golden era of Western RPGs. Back in 2003, BioWare dropped Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic, and it completely changed how we viewed storytelling in video games. Then a year later, Obsidian followed it up with KOTOR 2, or The Sith Lords, which, just like the first game, was a massive success. And naturally, the entire gaming community back then collectively held their breaths for KOTOR 3, and it was arguably the most anticipated sequel of the decade back then. But the gaming landscape was rapidly shifting beneath BioWare's feet. Blizzard's World of Warcraft was currently printing ungodly amounts of money, fundamentally altering how publishers viewed profitability. And at some point, EA and LucasArts looked at WoW's recurring monthly subscriptions and decided to take a massive swing. So instead of giving folks the single-player KOTOR 3 that they had been begging for, BioWare announced they were building a colossal MMORPG. BioWare's co-founder, Ray Mazuka, famously claimed this new project would effectively be KOTOR 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and beyond. And of course, the hype train immediately ripped its own brakes off, and suffice it to say, expectations placed on this game was already galactic. Because BioWare now had an impossible mission. They had to build an MMO appealing enough to pull millions of hardcore raiders away from World of Warcraft, while simultaneously delivering a branching cinematic narrative deep enough to appease the RPG folks who were still bitter about losing KOTOR 3. Really, they were trying to serve two different customers at the exact same time. And this impossible balancing act set the stage for one of the most chaotic and expensive game launches the industry had ever seen. In December 2011, Star Wars: The Old Republic finally released. The rumored development budget hovered around the $200 million mark, which may sound tiny in today's landscape, especially compared to giant industry flops like Concord, but back then it was one of the most expensive projects ever funded. You see, every single NPC, every side quest, and every class storyline was fully voice acted. Instead of reading static text boxes, you were directing a cinematic Star Wars movie with your friends. And for the first month, the gamble really did pay off. The servers were completely slammed. Millions of players jumped in, and the leveling experience was universally praised. People really thought this was the next evolution of the MMORPG. But then the hardcore MMO players hit the level cap. And so the cracks in the foundation started showing almost immediately. For example, the custom-built hero engine completely crumbled under the weight of large-scale combat. If you tried to participate in massive faction battles, the game turned into an unplayable PowerPoint presentation. On top of the tech issues, the endgame raid content was incredibly thin. There were guilds that cleared the available operations in weeks, then realized there was nothing left to do and immediately started canceling their subscriptions. Let's just say that the drop-off here was, well, brutal. Forums were flooded with doom posting, and the infamous Tortanic meme was born, painting the game as a sinking ship that had crashed straight into an iceberg of its own ambition. Within a year, EA had to swallow their pride, drop the mandatory monthly subscription, and switch to a free-to-play model just to stop people from leaving the game. And so to the outside world, it looked like SWTOR had officially lost the war against World of Warcraft and was bleeding out on the sidewalk. But it wasn't over just yet, as we were about to witness one of the wildest changes in MMO history. Eventually, the dust settled after the free-to-play switch, and that's when BioWare took a long look at the remaining player base and realized something very fascinating. You see, the people sticking around weren't logging in to grind raids or fight overworld bosses. No, folks were playing because they desperately wanted Mass Effect with lightsabers. Or, you know, just the simple classic KOTOR experience. So BioWare leaned directly into their greatest strength. They essentially stopped trying to beat World of Warcraft at its own game and instead transformed SWTOR into a completely different beast. Starting in 2015 with the Knights of the Fallen Empire expansion, the studio drastically overhauled the game's direction by introducing massive, episodic, single-player focused story campaigns. You were no longer just a random dude running errands on Tatooine. Now you were the Outlander, the central protagonist of the entire galaxy and the most interesting individual in the universe, making massive moral choices with a dedicated crew of companions. The game mutated into this bizarre, brilliant hybrid. It became a deep 100-hour single-player RPG that just happened to have a global chat and an auction house attached to it. Now, as you may have suspected, this course correction completely saved the game. By abandoning the traditional MMO rat race, Star Wars: The Old Republic carved out a totally unique niche. It secured a fiercely loyal, dedicated player base that kept the lights on for over a decade, surviving comfortably under the radar while other MMOs launched and quickly died. And such was the comfortable, predictable status quo, right up until EA dropped a bombshell on the Star Wars community in the summer of 2023. In June 2023, BioWare and EA suddenly announced they were handing the entire development of The Old Republic over to Broadsword Online Games. Now, if you aren't familiar with them, Broadsword is a boutique studio primarily known for keeping classic legacy MMOs like Ultima Online and Dark Age of Camelot running. Naturally, folks were ringing the alarm bells immediately. The phrase maintenance mode was plastered across every gaming forum, and we all assumed EA was sending the game out to a farm somewhere to squeeze out the last bit of milk before inevitably sending the cash cow to the slaughterhouse. All so BioWare could focus purely on the next Mass Effect and Dragon Age. But then a funny thing happened. Because Broadsword didn't put the game on life support. No, they strapped a goddamn jetpack to it. Over the past couple of years, they moved the servers to the cloud, they launched a highly requested Apex server, and successfully migrated the ancient game client to 64-bit. This means the game was finally allowed to utilize modern PC memory, which drastically made the frame rate smoother in heavily populated areas. Which brings us to the absolute craziest technical miracle of them all. You see, as of March 31st, the developers dropped a huge update confirming they are officially migrating the Old Republic to DirectX 12, and to pull this off, they are effectively gutting the ancient hero engine that the game has been built upon. Broadsword are aggressively future-proofing the game to completely overhaul the shaders, shadows, and overall graphical fidelity just in time for the massive 15th anniversary and the 8.0 expansion coming this December. SWTOR really has had one of the wildest journeys in MMO history, and in a turn of events that nobody expected, its future is looking brighter than ever before. So you would be returning or joining at just the right time. Thank you for watching, and remember, you can always join our community Discord by becoming a Patreon while also unlocking a few other perks like exclusive content and more. Speaking of which, thank you very much to all my wonderful Patreon members for supporting the channel. You're all awesome. This has been Mr. Holton, signing off.